Hello. The purpose of this video is to introduce you into the dimensioning techniques used by designers. The goal is for you to be able to use international dimensioning guidelines to correctly measure and label a multi-view sketch. So you were here last week, you created multi-view sketches of a variety of different objects. Now we're going to learn how to dimension them. Do make sure that you have the dimensioning packet in front of you so that you can take notes as you are watching the video. The first thing we're going to go over is what it means to dimension and how we dimension. And then we're going to go over some tricks to making sure your dimensions are correct every time, and then we'll have some practice. So let's see what's next. Okay, so dimensions, and I know my video is going to cover part of this, and I'll do my best to sort of work around this. But when you add dimensions to a multi-view sketch, essentially what you're adding are the measurements, the size of the object. So you can see here that we have some numbers that are now being placed around the multi-view object. Those indicate the size of the object. Now we're going to go over how to label, but I want to take a look here first at what these different measurements and how they're kind of set up. So take a look here and you'll see that there are some lines drawn out here. You'll notice that they don't touch the drawing. These lines are called extension lines. Essentially what you're doing is extending this part of your drawing out so that you can correctly indicate which part of the drawing that you are dimensioning. It is very important that you include extension lines to bracket the edges of your dimensions. You'll also notice that around the sides here of the number are two arrows. The arrows move away from the number and they touch the extension line. These are called dimension lines or dimensioning lines. These are very important as well to show the span of your dimension. Therefore, this dimension of 1 starts here and ends here. These extension lines indicate which contour or which part of the sketch I'm dimensioning. You must include these two lines in your drawings. Additionally, these numbers are not measurements of the drawing. They are measurements of the actual object. So important to remember that this drawing could be of something very tiny. It could be a microchip. It could also be a huge cornerstone building block of a building. We want to make sure that when we measure, we're measuring the actual object and sketching to scale. So we have these tiny pictures to represent either very, very small things or very large things. And these measurements are of the actual object. Here you'll see something that we're probably not going to see much in this class, but if you do end up having a circular component to your sketch, the diameter of the circle is indicated with this little circle with a line through it. So this shows that the diameter of this circle is 0.75. Okay, so let's move on to the rules and how we go ahead and dimension. The first thing here is that, where'd my video go? The first thing is to understand which dimensions go on which sketch. So you'll see this is a multi-view sketch, and if you remember correctly, this is your isometric sketch, this is your top view, this is your front view, and this is your right side view. You can take a look at that and how that lines up. Now, we don't just add measurements or dimensions to any old part of the picture. They're very specific. So overall, the top view will always show the depth of the object. So when we're talking about depth, we're talking about this. How far back does it go when I'm looking down at it? And those dimensions are always placed here to the right side of the top view. You will never put depth measurements, say, on the front view. The front view always shows the width of the object. So all of these measurements show the width, and they're always placed here at the top of the drawing. And we'll talk about these two in a second. And then the right side view always shows the height of the object. So these two measurements are talking about how tall the object is. And they're always placed to the left side of the right side view. So the placement is very important. And that takes us to the rules of dimensioning. So you're going to put these in your notes. The first rule, and I know my video covers this a little bit, is that dimensions should never be duplicated, nor should the same information be given in two different ways. We want to keep the dimensioning very simple, or as simple as we can. So notice here I have my depth showing on my top view. It's the only measurement showing there because it's the only one I need. Notice on my right side view, I have the height, overall height. There's only one measurement because that's the only thing I need. Now, this one comes into the next rule, but I'm gonna sort of skip over parts of this. The front view shows the most dimensions because it has the most contours. It has the most sort of details to it. So you'll notice that when I include these measurements, I am talking about the width of the different contours. Now, one thing I want to point out here, because we want to not duplicate anything or give information in two different ways. Here, this measurement talks about the overall width, very important. But since I have these separate details here, I need to include a couple other measurements. So I've included this measurement, and I've also included this measurement. The important thing to notice here is that I did not include this one. And the reason for that is I can figure this out by knowing these three. So I can say if this is 2 and this is 1.5, this must be 0.5. I don't have to include that because it's understood. I'm going to skip these two for right now because it's going to go into the next one. Okay. I know this is my video is covering it, so I'll share the words. So the second rule is the dimension should be attached to the view that best shows the contour of the feature to be dimensioned. Okay, so we're going to look back at that same sketch. So we're still going to stick to our normal things. So depth, height, width. But notice I have a couple height measurements here. Then the reason that I included that here is because these two contours are not shown very well in these two drawings, these two views, excuse me. So the view of this contour and this contour are best shown in the front view. That is the only time it is okay to include something that would normally be included in another view. So for example, this is a height, so it would normally be included here, but you don't get a view of that contour in this view. So that's the only time you can include it. And finally, rule number 3 is whenever possible, locate the dimensions between the adjacent views. So whenever possible, the depth should always be on the right side of the top view. The width should always be on the top of the front view, and the height should always be on the left side of the right view. The only exception to that, again, is when there's a contour that's weird and it can only be shown out here. You would never put this one over here and draw lines through it. That would make it too messy. That's the only exception to that rule. Okay, so let's look at some practice and see if we can figure out what's wrong with some of these views. Okay, so in this slide, there are two views that have been duplicated. So pause the video here and see if you can figure out which of the two views have been duplicated. So hopefully the first one you saw was this one. So this view, this dimension is not appropriate. This is showing the depth of this device or this object, which is also shown over here. And this is the appropriate place to show that dimension, not here. Okay. The other one is a little tricky. This one here should not be here. We don't need that 1.25 here because this contour is also this contour. And since I know this is 0.5 and this is 0.75 and this is 2.5, I can figure this out, this being the 1.25. So I don't need that dimension. Everything else I think is correct on here. Let's look at another example. Okay, now one of these is incorrectly placed. So I believe there is only one incorrectly placed here. So go ahead and pause this and see if you can find that. So hopefully you saw that this one is incorrectly placed. We have now the left, this should be on the left side. Ooh, actually there's two. This one should be on the left side here, and this one should be here, showing the depth. Okay, so we have two incorrectly placed. And then the last one is locate the incorrectly placed dimension. And I do think in this one there is only one. So pause the video and show me which one that is. Oh no, there's two. There's two. Pause the video and show me two. So you should have seen this one is incorrectly placed. Again, it's the same one in the last one. Should be here. And this is showing width, so it should be here, down here, showing the width of these. So hopefully you figured those out. What you should be doing next is completing your practice. Make sure you get the packet, or you have the packet in front of you because you just completed the notes. Then you'll follow the instructions for the remaining parts of the assignment, which are attached to it, and all the instructions should be pretty clear. Good luck.